Brittney Griner in tears, Aliyah Boston lifting her teammates, and the Indiana Fever storming into the semifinals for the first time since 2015. Analysts didn't expect this to happen, not with 6 injured players and no Caitlin Clark. So how did Indiana flip the narrative, and what does Griner's breakdown tell us about her future? How did Aliyah Boston dominate Griner to the point where there are now talks of retirement? 6 players injured. That's how many the Fever were missing when they walked into Game 3 in Atlanta. And somehow they're the team headed to the semifinals. Think about that. Caitlin Clark out. Sophie Cunningham, Sydney Colson, Chloe Bibby, Erin McDonald, Damiris Dantas, all sidelined. Practically half of Stephanie White's rotation was sitting in street clothes, yet they still found a way to snap a playoff drought that stretched back nearly a full decade. I think any time that you're a winner-go-home situation, there's desperation. And so it has to carry over. I know we're in the same situation, our back is against the wall. We gotta come out and we've gotta play with that sense of urgency, we've gotta play with that hunger. We've gotta value every single possession and every single opportunity. The last time Indiana won a playoff series, Tamika Catchings was still anchoring the roster, Stephanie White was coaching them to a finals run, and Natasha Howard was just breaking into the league. Since then, fans have grown used to early exits and rebuilding talk, but this team flipped the script on Friday. Analysts said there was no chance they'd beat Atlanta without Clark's shooting or Cunningham's energy. Some even argued the Dream's depth would wear them out. Instead, Indiana looked like the team playing at full strength. Inside Gateway Center Arena, the crowd had the feel of split loyalties. Fever fans came in loud, and by the second half you could actually hear them more than Dream supporters. It felt like a home game during an elimination matchup, something that gave the players clear juice down the stretch. And make no mistake, the injured stars were part of that too. Clark never stopped rallying from the bench, Cunningham acted like another assistant coach, and Bibby was in every huddle. They had their 6th man, even without being on the court. Then you realize just how personal this victory was for the actual lineup. This isn't just Aliyah Boston's first playoff series win, it's Kelsey Mitchell's first. Same for Lexi Hull, who's grinded her way into the rotation. Every player who touched the floor had a role, but for those names it doubled as validation. And after the way games 1 and 2 unfolded, it felt overdue. The officiating stirred plenty of anger around the league, missed calls, whistles late in the 4th. But the Fever didn't let it bleed into their focus in Game 3. They shut the door for good. Atlanta had the healthier roster, the assumed advantage, and the home floor. Indiana countered with grit, togetherness, and just enough playmaking when it mattered. And once the Dream melted in the final minutes, resilience won out. Which brings us straight to Aliyah Boston's showdown with Brittney Griner, and how it signaled a clear changing of the guard in the paint. So why was Brittney Griner sitting on the bench during the most of an elimination game? That's the part that shocked everyone. You're talking about a player who for years was the face of playoff basketball in the paint. Whenever the postseason came around, she was the one defenses dreaded, the one who could swing momentum with a blocked shot or a quick hook. And yet in this series, especially in Game 3, she wasn't even trusted to finish. That alone tells you something about how fast things have shifted. Griner built her career on overpowering her matchups inside. She had the length, the quick step, and the instincts to protect the rim while still punishing slower bigs on the other end. In past playoff runs, she put up double-doubles without even sweating. But against Indiana, none of that showed up. She struggled to score, she looked flat-footed on rotations, and the Dream couldn't rely on her defense to cover gaps. Instead of being the anchor, she became the liability. On the other side, Aliyah Boston was everything Griner used to be. Boston finished Game 3 with 14 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists, and it wasn't just the numbers, it was when she made them. With the clock winding down in the 4th, she got position, finished the go-ahead layup with just 7.4 seconds left, and left Atlanta with no answer. That single play pretty much flipped Griner's career highlight reel upside down. Boston's defensive approach was just as important. She never chased blocks or overcommitted. Instead, she pushed Griner off her favored spots, angled her body to force fadeaways, and stayed disciplined when Griner tried to back her down. That positioning made Griner uncomfortable. Shots that looked automatic in years past rattled out, and by the 3rd quarter you could see the frustration building. There's a difference between losing to talent and losing because someone flat out took away your comfort zone. Boston gave her none. The numbers back it up. Griner's playoff averages across her prime seasons show her producing in double digits with high efficiency and heavy minutes. In this series, she dropped to career lows. 2 points and 2 rebounds in one game, barely cracking the box score, then losing her minutes when it mattered most. Compare that to Boston's stat line, not only scoring and rebounding but actually creating for teammates with 6 assists. It's the most direct contrast you could possibly script. And now, the question starts popping up. Is Brittney Griner done as a dominant center? When your coach benches you during an elimination game, it signals more than just a rough night. It suggests a loss of faith. Sure, she's had a long career and plenty of highs, but the way this series unfolded, it looked less like a slump and more like a closing chapter. Maybe she's slowing down for good. Maybe she's eyeing retirement sooner than expected. Or maybe she simply ran into a player who already looks like the future of the position. So while Griner quietly sat on the sideline, Boston took the spotlight that used to belong to her. And in that moment, it wasn't just a single game deciding who moved on to the semifinals. It felt like a passing of the torch. The old standard bowed out, the new one stood tall, and nobody watching could pretend not to notice what had just happened. Now the story moves from one player to the whole roster, because as great as Boston was, Indiana needed more than one star to close this out. It took Mitchell attacking, Hull making hustle plays, Sims setting the table, and role players stepping in exactly where they were needed. And that collective effort is the real reason the Fever are still alive in the postseason. Imagine losing 6 rotation players. That's not just depth gone. It's entire game plans ripped apart. Yet somehow Indiana managed to put together one of their most complete team wins of the entire season. So if it wasn't Caitlin Clark leading the charge, and it wasn't the bench packed with usual firepower, then who decided this game? The answer is a mix of leaders, veterans, and players who absolutely refused to let the season end. Kelsey Mitchell set the tone. You could see it from the opening quarter. Atlanta's defense clogged the lane, bodies everywhere, hands reaching on her drives. And yet she still found buckets anyway, finishing with 24 points, including 19 in the first half alone. That was what kept Indiana within striking distance when things easily could have unraveled. Without her ability to carve through traffic and find space in tight windows, the Fever wouldn't even have been close enough for the late-game drama. She's been their leading scorer across this postseason, and in this matchup she played like the anchor for a team missing its superstar. Then there's Odyssey Sims. A hardship contract pickup, and now suddenly one of the most important players on the floor in a knockout game. She stuffed the stat sheet with 16 points and 8 assists, but the real story is the timing. That critical pass to Boston in the final seconds that set up the go-ahead layup. That's poise you don't usually get from someone who only recently got there. Sims gave Mitchell another ball handler, another confident voice, and when the defense collapsed, she knew where to send the ball. No hesitation, no panic, just composure when Indiana needed it most. Lexi Hull had the single biggest defensive play of the night. With 7.4 seconds left, Atlanta had one last chance. Ryan Howard tried triggering the inbound, but Hull read it perfectly. Quick anticipation, a clean steal, game over. That steal erased any chance of a miracle comeback and sealed the series win. Moments like that don't show up as flashy as a box score stat, but it was the defining sequence for Indiana's season. Brianna Turner deserves her flowers too. She wasn't lighting up the stat sheet, but her defensive positioning and activity gave Indiana the toughness to compete with Atlanta's length. Stephanie White has described her as the ultimate pro, and you could see why. She rotated where others slipped, contested shots without fouling, and did the thankless work to stabilize possessions. Add Natasha Howard, who chipped in little plays that don't always get featured, and you had 2 veterans making sure the glue held together. Even the smallest minutes mattered. Michaela Timpson only played 4 minutes, but she pulled down 5 rebounds in that stretch. That's instant impact. Shea Petty had the clutch 3 in the 4th, that flipped momentum yet again. Those are contributions that don't scream headline, but they shift games, especially when rotations are thin. The bench itself also played a role without logging minutes. Clark, Cunningham and Bibby were active in huddles, clapping, shouting, even just lending energy. Clark even showed up laced in black Air Force Ones, and Fever fans couldn't help but call it a good luck charm. That sideline presence gave Indiana a sixth-man mentality, and it mattered in the late stages when composure was everything, especially considering the officiating drama from earlier games. Down the stretch in Game 3, they didn't blink. This win wasn't about one star lifting everyone. It was layered, built on everyone accepting a role and stepping into it when their moment came. And now, the question becomes, if this injury-riddled team can finish off Atlanta like that, what happens when they're staring down the two-time champions in Las Vegas? You think knocking out Atlanta with 6 injured players was impressive? Wait until you see what's waiting in Vegas. The Indiana Fever's reward for their first playoff series win in nearly a decade is a matchup with the team that has been running the league, the Las Vegas Aces. This isn't the Dream's young roster anymore. This is a 2-time champion led by A'ja Wilson, a player some are already calling one of the greatest forwards ever. Add Jackie Young, Jewel Lloyd, and Chelsea Gray, and you're looking at a lineup that knows how to close games and doesn't flinch under pressure. The contrast between these squads couldn't be starker. Indiana is patched together, still battling through the absence of Caitlin Clark and a bench filled with injured veterans. Vegas is full strength, talented at every position, and no stranger to playoff basketball. Just last week they survived a test against Seattle, with Wilson dropping 38 points and Jackie Young hitting the game winner with 12 seconds left. That's what Indiana is walking into, a team that thrives in crunch time and expects to win. Aliyah Boston has been sensational, but now comes her hardest test yet. A'ja Wilson isn't just a scorer, she's versatile enough to guard multiple positions while still dominating the glass. Boston will need every bit of her strength and discipline to match up. The paint isn't just about points, it's about control. And whoever wins that battle probably decides the series. The Fever's other challenge is tactical. When their ball movement clicks, they create open looks and strike quickly in transition. Against Vegas, every mistake turns into easy points the other way. This is where Kelsey Mitchell's shot-making becomes critical. She can't afford to have empty possessions, not against one of the highest-powered offenses in the league. Odyssey Sims will also be tested as a secondary playmaker, trying to find windows against defenders who rotate faster than anything Atlanta put out there. That they haven't seen the releases yet. They caught us when we were a bit in turmoil. And, that date, they whooped us. One of those stretches, so, you know what, well, we'll buckle and hone in where we can, and, take care of business. Becky Hammon already said it plainly. They haven't seen the real aces yet. That wasn't a throwaway line. It signals confidence, and honestly, a warning. The Fever will have to prove their resilience wasn't a one-round story. This series will either confirm they're building something sustainable or show the limits of heart when stacked against proven championship talent. Aliyah Boston didn't just win a matchup, she flipped the storyline. Where Brittney Griner once controlled the paint, Boston walked in and claimed it as her own. That performance marked a real turning point, not only for her, but also for the Fever's identity as a team that doesn't crumble under pressure. What makes this run even harder to ignore is how short-handed Indiana was. If they can win a playoff series missing nearly half their roster, what happens when Clark and the others return in 2026? Could we be watching the very beginning of a dynasty taking shape? Do you think this is the end of Griner? Let us know down in the comments below.